This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses.
I don't know if it's the same for you, but when I think about Dumble, I think about the Robben forward tone. And I got a message or a review from a chap called Jeffrey who was kind of asking, like, what Robben forward tone do you mean? There's been a few. And this is, I think, a really good point, because for me, the tone that I'm thinking of is actually not the more recent Robben forward tones. And I think that's probably any photos that we've got of Robben forward settings are probably closer to like 2007, 2008, sort of like the Rockoplast era. Whereas the stuff that I'm interested in is quite a lot before that, like the Talk to Your Daughter era. And although I think it's the same sort of gear that Robben's been using, and in specific his Dumble amp, typically if we copy his settings, I think we're going for basically the wrong thing if we're looking for that Talk to Your Daughter album, because what I've found, and what this video is more or less kind of exploring, is that the amount of gain that there is on that album is kind of bonkers compared to what you actually get out of your amp modeler, in this case like the fractal stuff. So I think there's way more gain being used than we see on Robben's more recent settings, and as he's aged, perhaps, you know, his tastes have kind of gone cleaner. But for sure on the Talk to Your Daughter album, and let me know if you think this sounds about right or not, but it sounds to me like there's way more gain going on. So there's a few things we can do in the fractal world. One is go into the input trim. The other is just to up the gain in general. I'm going to try both of those things. Another kind of key point here is that I was listening to Talk to Your Daughter. It sounds like there's actually quite a lot of reverb going on with quite a lot of high end. So I did add that in after, but go in there and open up the high cut or the high damping on the reverb, on a plate reverb or a hall reverb. I think I ended up using hall reverb and maybe the drum room. Both of those, just open up the high cut and see what works for you. And then another key point that I found on the forums, 2290 reverb setting at about 168 for his solo tones. So I think that was something that a tech had said. So that works quite nicely for that. But yeah, I just wanted to explore getting some of these more saturated tones that I think of when I think about Dumble. I don't really think about the more clean stuff. I think about the really kind of throaty, loads of gain, smooth singing, all that sort of stuff.
These videos are brought to you by G66 UK, and that's the place in the UK where you can get an Axe FX, an FM3 or an FM9, and there's a UK service centre and no import charges to pay, so all good news on that front. So G66 UK. Now, in today's video, I wanted to check out some of our options for essentially Robben Ford's amp, which is in the Fractal universe in a couple of different places. Now, this is one of the first ODS type amps that was ever built. So this ODS 100 Ford here is actually based on a schematic. Cliff from Fractal does own a Dumble, but he doesn't own Robben Ford's Dumble. There are schematics available, but I think that amplifier has actually been modded a fair amount. So we're going to check that one out. We're also going to check out on B, let's check out this one, Bluedo High Lead, because this is basically the Bluedo Tone guy had Larry Carlton and Robben Ford's actual amps on a bench and created clones of them. If you check out Yek's amp guide on this, he's got some really good information around all of the amps within the Fractal world. Actually, it's a completely perfect resource if you're trying to get to know more information about this sort of stuff. I use it all the time. A really, really knowledgeable guy and generous, you know, sharing that sort of information with us. So I'm going to move a ribbon mic up here and a dynamic mic around here. But sort of let's kind of think about what we can do here. So I'm just going to start this more or less simple. Maybe I'll add a very light amount of plate. We'll go with a large plate, but keep that mix low. Okay, so what I'm going to do, the gain in the overdrive on Robben's actual amp seem to be set around there. So volume and treble, basically, I think a lot of these amps kind of varied, but mid's just below halfway, treble backed off a little bit further, and the bass pushed beyond halfway. Presence at about 3 is good, gain at about 3 is good, and the master volume I'm leaving at 5, and the overdrive volume I've upped a bit here. The bright switch he normally runs off. Now if you're finding, like me, that doesn't really scream to me that that's kind of that reminiscent of Robben Ford's tones, because it's sounding pretty cleanish to me. So maybe it's because I'm playing a Strat into it. What I'm thinking is, and what I've read is, affect this input trim. On the real Dumble amplifiers, there are input trimmers. You can actually get things a little bit more cooking, because to me, when I look at Robben Ford's settings on the amp and then I listen to what actually comes out, when you apply them, it's always, to me, seems like a little bit less gain. So I would either increase the input trim, or this sort of thing actually, I think, gets you more. little bit more of that kind of sustainy stuff going on. Let's move that dynamic a little bit further away, and the ribbon. So that's kind of like the Bluedo, and I'm thinking probably if we go to scene 2, it's going to be a same sort of situation. So scene 2, remember I had ODS 100 forward, bright switch off, treble and mid's just a little bit below, bass just a bit above, presence about 3, start to bring the overdrive volume up. Like, that's just pretty much clean. So our first kind of gain sets the input sensitivity and the input trim, and then overdrive is that other setting that that's kind of nice. So those are just some really quick tips. If you're finding that you're not getting to that kind of Dumble, the overdrive stuff, which to me is not necessarily that forthcoming with the Ford amps in particular. So yeah, give some of those things a try. I'm going to drop this preset in, I'm going to make a couple more adjustments to it, but things that we can do, add in a slapback, and we'll go with tape type, mono tape, time about 160. You want to set our feedback to and then I'll mix nice and low. Even lower. If you look up the history of Robben's amp, it's like been modified a lot, so that would make sense that there are different kind of schematics floating around. What I should really do is just have both amps, and then job be a real good in there, wouldn't it? So you might want to drive up front as well, even, because for me maybe that isn't getting to where I'd necessarily be feeling it as much as if I had a blues driver up front, for instance.
So maybe give that a try. So that's a Bluto there and the Ford. Not the easiest kind of amp to get along with, but I think maybe consider deviating away from Robben's actual settings, because I think, to be fair, it sounds to me, from what I've heard of Robben Ford's amp and from what I've read, that actually what's inside his amp has changed a fair amount over the years. So give that a try and see where you get on. If you've got other tips for people, please let them know in the comments as well. For me personally, I probably want a bit of dual delay in here as well, because that makes everything better. Why not go with the 2290? But yeah, really awesome sounding amps, especially when you start to up that gain. They just have this really nice thing to them with a Strat for lead playing. So I'll catch you in another video soon. G66 UK. I'll chuck this Robben's amps preset up into the folder if you want to give it a try. Gumroad is the place to get all of those, and email me if you've not got the link where you can get the new presets without having to buy again. Cheers.